You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 279 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden Dale here with the one, the only Pankaj, Bhojwani. Pankaj, how we doing?
Doing well. Excited for Kansas. I'll be leaving in just over a week. We're recording a little bit earlier this week. It's a Tuesday evening for me, Wednesday morning for you. And a week and a half I'm going to be in Kansas City. So looking forward to that. How are you?
Very good. We are seeing Usurp the Shadow Throne previews starting to come through, and that is exciting to see. Obviously, Alice is just mixing it up on us a little bit, changing, and I really like this, but they're changing the preview season approach yet again. And I think at this point, what we've established is that there is just not a set cadence for how they do preview seasons. Sometimes we'll see a few more things up front. Typically, we're seeing the heroes up front, and then we may have somewhere between a 2 to 3.5 week preview period is basically kind of how it's looking. And I'm here for it, honestly. I don't mind. I think, being flexible is great.
Yeah, I don't remember the Omens preview season and what that was like, but I just know in the past we've had preview seasons where it's over 3 days just before the world premiere, and then those where it's over like 3 weeks when we're being drip fed like a card a day and it feels really, really slow. And now we're in this feels like a 3-week-ish spoiler season, because when does our spoiler card come out?
5th of September, so stay tuned for that one.
So quite a while out.
Arsenal Pass preview. Yeah, not for a couple of weeks, so not next week, but
3
the
weeks
following
total.
Week. Yeah, literally
3 weeks total is
almost 3 weeks from now. Yeah, so it is. And then the following weekend is the world premiere.
Yeah, I haven't taken a look at the spoilers reveal schedule, actually. Let me go ahead and do that. I believe February has a pretty good spoiler schedule.
Okay. Go and check that one out if you haven't already. But yeah, I've been enjoying what we've seen so far. We'll touch on a little bit of that in the news this week in Flesh and Blood, though. Pankaj, have you been prepping for Kansas? Have you been playing some Flesh and Blood?
Yes, I have. I've actually been playing a bunch on Talisha. I've been doing something that I used to berate a lot, where I'm like just random jamming games on Talisha is a waste of time. But I took the advice of one Margin Bay, who told me that's how he has been prepping, and that's how he prepped a lot for Vegas. And he said it's actually gotten a lot better, and it's very useful now. And I have been pleasantly surprised as well. I've been doing some random Talisha practice, and I'm actually getting good games. I'm actually learning the deck a lot better. And I'm playing against opponents. I'm learning like what they're able to do as well. Recording some of these as well, and then when I have the patience, I am watching back the recordings as well, and that's been quite useful. I watched back a game against Sahala, I watched back a game against Gone in a Flash Cecilio, and it's all been fairly useful. So been doing that. Still wouldn't say I'm exactly where I want to be with the deck yet, but I still have a week and a half. So that's been my week in Flesh and Blood. What about yours?
Not much has changed. No Flesh and Blood for me, Pankaj, until probably I reckon end of next week is where I'm going to start to be back focusing on Flesh and Blood once we have a number of these preview cards. I probably would have said a week later, like almost the week before the world premiere, but I think actually just based on the previews and the rate we're getting them, I think by the end of next week I'm going to be brewing. I'm going to be looking already at like what I want my Viscerai to look like, potentially thinking about the upgrades for Levira and things like that, and starting to just get really familiar with the rares and commons as well from what we've seen so far ahead of the world premiere, but also like just the Majestics, because sometimes those play a role in these world premieres as well, and they're really cool when you see them and you want to know what they do when they show up. So looking forward to of course just a few weeks, and I'm actually got the week prior to the world premiere I'm in Correia for a bit of holiday, so really looking forward to that, leaving in a couple of weeks.
Every time when a new set comes out post the set, us getting the full set, I tell myself, wow, everything I was brewing before the set came out while we were still in spoiler season was actually kind of pointless, because we were missing critical pieces. And so every time I say next spoiler season, I will not do this and just wait until the whole set comes out. And then I get really excited looking at the spoilers and I can't help myself, and I start brewing again anyway before we get all the set. Is that something that happens to you as well?
I guess I start thinking about like interactions and things that I find interesting, and like thinking about how previous, current cards interact with these new cards. I don't typically go as far as starting to put like decks together, right? I'm more thinking about like card combinations and interactions of like, oh, this is quite a cool interaction. I wonder what this would look like. Or here's an upgrade on a resource card than we've had previous. What would that mean for something like the Via, for instance? So yeah, I typically don't go too deep into it because to your point, a lot of it gets thrown out the window immediately once we get to that World Premiere weekend. But yeah.
Yeah, I go pretty deep into it because I can't help myself.
Because
I should try and not do that because it's a bunch of it ends up being a big waste of time. I managed to find the spoiler schedule. Looks like we have on average about 2 to 3 spoilers a day, all the way until September 6th. It seems like some days only have 1, but then there's like one day that has like 4, so it's like 2 to 3.
Nice.
You can expect throughout the day.
Well, we are one of the last, so read into that what you will.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means anymore. I feel like in the past you could get a read. They used to follow some sort of cadence of like, it'll be expansion slot cards first and then main set. But then they've definitely flipped that around before, and they're just doing whatever they want with the schedule. So who knows?
To find out. Anyway, let's get into the news, Pankaj.
News. We've had spoiler season, so let's talk about some cards that have come out that have caught our eye. We're gonna start with the big one. Usurp the Shadow Throne. This is a 13 cost, 13 power, 3 block Shadow Runeblade attack with Blood Debt that is a Viscerai specialization. And it says if you have usurped this turn, this costs 6 resources less to play, and you may play it from your banished zone. When this hits a hero, turn all cards in their banished zone face down. They lose X life, and you gain X life, where X is the number of cards turned face down this way. This is insane. This card is really good. At first, I was like, oh, it's just for Shadow Mirrors.
Yeah.
But then you realize Mechanologist that boost, like Dash.io, has a bunch of cards in the banished zone. Earth Heroes, things Jarl right now, with Ruban Carapace and Falling of the Ground and Plow Hunter, have a bunch of face-up cards in the banished zone. There's all the Shadow Heroes. There's various other things. I mean, Viscerai's own cards can put cards in the banished zone. Think Cull, for example. And then this just is 13 power plus X. And this is the big thing that we definitely need to discuss and I need your thoughts on. This is legendary rarity, but not legendary keyword, which means as of the current rules of the game, you can have up to 3 copies of this in your deck, in your main deck, and it's legendary rarity.
I mean, happy to start there. I think that is the thing I was like, I don't know how I feel about that off the bat, like playing these legendaries. But what I am assuming, based on when we've seen things like this happen in the past, is that these will be printed at 3 times the rate of a legendary, I would assume. So from a pull rate perspective, I assume it's fine.
I hope so, but my current apprehension is that this is going to be really expensive, because I do think you're at least going to want, I feel like you're going to want between 2 or 3 of these. Again, we can't speculate too much. We just spoke about this. Can't really brew too much until you've actually seen the whole set. But even when you think of the flaw of this card, even if your opponent doesn't have any cards in the banish zone, you pay 7 resources for 13 damage on your blue. It's already very, very good with the hoop of needing to usurp this, but that feels like something the deck wants to do all over the place already. So I'm a bit nervous about the price point, about the potential price point for this, even if they do print this at 3 times the price, 3 times the rate of a legendary.
So I think that's interesting. You say like usurp something you want to do, but that costs extra cards, right? And I think that's where I went immediately was I went to the preview gallery and I was like, right, what has usurp on it currently? And so far, what we've seen from Usurp is
it's the attacks.
It's all the attacks.
So you need
are non-attacks going to have Usurp? Question mark. But so, for instance, if we take something like a 0 cost, like I don't know, Demon Bound Gloomblade, right? First of all, you're going to have a way to give that go again.
The hero gives it go again if you're on the other side.
Sure. So you need to be on the right side to do that. That's fine. So if you're on the right side, you can give it go again. But then that's 1 card plus your 2 resource cards and your tunic counter, let's say, and then your
4-pitch Fable.
Okay, that's also true. It's a Fable. It's legendary rarity. It's got
You're right. You need tunic or like one of.
Or you play there's the 2 cost usurp card as well, right? I forget the name of that 2 cost one. We have seen a 2 cost one, right? Maybe we haven't yet. No, there's only 1 cost and 3 cost we've seen so far in 0 cost. I don't know if we've actually seen a 2-cost yet. But anyway, so you need obviously some number of additional cards to be able to make this happen. So I'm not saying that's massive hoops, but there's some small hoops to jump through, albeit the card itself gets offset by the fact that it's a blue 3 block as well. So yeah, I think this card is going to get play. Is it 1? Is it 3? How impactful will it be? I think let's see. Obviously, if there's like a non-attaction usurp that comes out that's like a buff or something like that, then you're like, yeah, I mean, Natch.
I suppose 3-off can actually be quite risky, given your front side is randomly banishing cards off the top. And if you banish this
that's true.
early on, and it does have Blood Debt, so it does ask for a steep cost, to your point. You do need 7 resources to pay into it. Yep. And you need to be on the correct side because you need to usurp first, typically. And if you just have this in your deck and you randomly banish it at a time when you're not prepared to play it, you're just ticking down to Blood Debt.
Yeah.
And so that could be a problem. Also depends how many blues the deck wants to run. So yeah, you're right. It maybe isn't a 3-off. Maybe it is just a sideboard piece, in which case the legendary rarity feels a lot more palatable. I will say, though, I feel like it's a bit of a flavor miss for the card Usurp the Shadow Throne to have potentially 3 copies of it in the deck. I think about, it's just such a, Visrai has usurped the Shadow Throne. Oh, but he did it 3 times in one game. It just feels a little bit much. At the same time, it's one of those things where I just know we have all complained about very strong one-offs in the deck, like Wrath of Retribution, for example. And so do you want 3 of... it's like, there's that tension, right? Where you don't want 3 of the crazy impactful card. At the same time, as a flavor perspective, Usurp the Shadow Throne feels like something that happens once. I don't know, what are your thoughts on the flavor part?
Maybe he did do it twice. Maybe he, Chain was 1, and then, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm interested. I'd love to ask the question to the design team of why is this not got the legendary text type on it. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Where do you want to go next? We could cover 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, I think we want to cover the Majestic
Bone Barrier?
Necromancer defense reaction. Yeah, Bone Barrier.
Love to. I can take this one if you like. So Bone Barrier is blue Necromancer defense reaction at Majestic. Defense for 2, cost 0, and says when this defends, you may destroy an ally you control or discard an ally. If you do, this gets +2 defense, and importantly, Punkage, it is a Necromancer defense reaction, not Shadow Necromancer defense reaction. So is also a card for Gravy Bones as well. This card seems good.
Yeah, I'm curious how much Gravy would want to play it. It does feel like Gravy's blue base is quite short up for cards that he wants to be able to put in the graveyard on his own turn. Mm-hmm. Right, for his thing. Malice, it does feel good. It feels very like role player, not flashy. Like you probably put this just for consistency and stuff, but you're still, once you go ahead and use this, you did basically just did a 0 for... Actually, no, how good is this? Even when you do 0 for 4, discard an ally, like... I don't know, is that great?
I think it's more the destroy, right? Like, your opponent's like, oh, that ally's about to die to decay next turn, and they don't have multiple like ways to attack with both allies, so I'm just going to let it die to decay, and then they're like, I'm going to attack your face, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to trade it in for 2 defense or whatever. I don't know. I think this card does seem... Yeah. I think what I like about this card is it's super flexible. It's a blue... Defending for 2 is just fine. Defending for 4, and you can do it from an ally on the field, or you can potentially do it from an ally in hand as well. I think I just like the flexibility of this card. I think it's also cool design. I love this kind of design of a card that has that kind of flexibility.
I think the design is cool. I just feel like if this is the way I'm going to be filling up, getting zombies into my graveyard as Malice, I'm going to feel a little bit underwhelmed.
Okay, fair. Anything else you want to...
It's just such a long way away from cards like Portside Exchange and cards like Golden Tipple.
Like, for Gravy, I agree.
So much worse. As I'm saying, if that's the way Malice needs to fill her out with zombies, whereas Gravy gets to actually replace them and draw a card and create a gold or whatever, like it just feels such a big step down that I'll be quite concerned if cards like this is the way I need to fill my yard with zombies as Malice.
I kind of feel okay with it. I don't know. Kind of okay with
like
it.
Just look at this next to Portside Exchange. Like this is like laughable.
Yes, but you can play zombies profitably from your hand. Well, but more profitably than Gravy can.
Is that true?
Right? I mean, how many 0
Why
costs?
is it profitable from your hand?
Well, how many 0 cost allies?
But how is it profitable? You just play it, it uses the action point, it doesn't even attack because it came from your hand?
No, but I mean, you can play it on the end of chains, right? Cost 0. You can just play it from 1 card hands and things like that. I think Malice does play them more profitably, but
okay,
we'll see.
Okay. We'll have to see. Don't think there's anything else. Anything else that's in the majestic or higher rarity, I suppose, that's come out in the past few days.
I don't think so.
Unless there's something else you want to talk about anyway.
It's a lot of role players. No, I think I'm okay. We'll have a lot more chat next week, I think, because we'll see a lot more previews, a lot more discussion to be had. Obviously, some really big attacks, right? Like the Harbinger of Destruction and just a number of really big old attacks. But yeah, I think we'll see more things.
Actually, there is a Leviathan card that I want to talk about.
Go for it.
It's called Consuming Strength. This is a yellow 2-cost Shadow Brute attack that attacks for 6 and blocks for 3. It has Blood Debt. And it says play this only if you control a Blasmaphet. But it also has instant pay 1, banish this from your hand. Your next attack this turn gets +2. The only reason I wanted to bring this up was if you remember my rant from last week, Hayden, about how Assassin was getting a bunch of flexible modal cards, and I feel like Ranger really needs them. Seeing this card just gives me confidence that this sort of design space is coming to other classes. We saw it also, I guess, in Omens with like the dualities. But I'm like, like my arrow that's also a buff, or my arrow that's also a trap, for example, and my buff that's also something else. My buff that's also an arrow. Like, I think it's pretty cool to see this in other heroes, and I want it to come to like other classes that have the A+B+C problem.
I mean, this is exactly the sort of card that I love. Like it's again, flexibility is what I love. And last week I issued a bit of a challenge. I said I'm welcoming LSS to prove me wrong that Leviathan can either be unplayable or busted and nothing in between. I mean, this is the sort of card that just creates consistency and is like decent rate, right? Like, okay, I have a blue and I have this in my hand. I banish it to satisfy my blood debt and I get 2 value off the back of it still, and I attack with my weapon. Yeah, okay, this may do the thing that I said that you cannot do with Leviathan, so it's very interesting.
It might just be a limited role player, to be honest, because you look at it next to something like Blood Harvest, and you're like, oh, Blood Harvest definitely goes in your CC deck. This one definitely reads a little bit more like limited, but maybe Leviathan still plays it in CC. I missed something. Actually, there is another majestic we actually absolutely should talk about.
Okay.
Battle Clearing Bellow.
Oh, I haven't seen this one.
Oh, okay. This is a blue 3-cost brute action that also blocks for 3.
Oh, I have seen this one. Sorry, this is just the brute.
It's an action.
This is the
yeah. Your next attack with 6 or more base power this turn gets +6 power. Go again. So, not itself a blue 6, but you can resolve this. You pitch a blue to this, and it still gives you 6 values. So 6 go again on a blue 3 block is very, very strong as Flesh and Blood rate goes. And I think this is a big upgrade for Toughnut.
Yeah, this is very good for
Toughnut. This is insane in Toughnut.
Yeah, the rest it kind of sucks in, I think, though, because it's not a 6 power.
Yeah. Yeah, probably stuff like Rhino or whatever still can't play
Might
it.
be okay
but Toughnut is...
Not.
Like, the thing with Toughnut is that, sometimes you leave him with 3 cards, or you leave him with 2 cards, and he can't really convert profitably. But if he has something like this, like, it's why Song of Sinew is so good, right? They actually have a very profitable 1-card play.
You can...
And the fact that you can even overpitch to this...
Yes.
You can overpitch to this if you have, like, 3 cards. It's got so good.
I think this could... Yeah, I think this could also be okay in RKO potentially as well, as a resource cast that has utility.
What attacks do they have that has 6 or more? Does it retroactively buff if you RKO? If you RKO later, does it retroactively?
I assumed, but maybe it doesn't. That's a good point. I just assumed it did.
Yeah,
it says your next attack. I don't think this is constantly.
I don't think this is constantly checking.
It's not. It's next attack. So you're right. So actually, just disregard that. I thought it was. Yeah. So it doesn't work.
Blue 3 block for your Toughnut blue base. You can flip into this and just rock. You don't get a toughness token, but
this is a Toughnut card.
So good.
This is definitely a Toughnut card.
It's a nuts Toughnut card at that.
It's a tough nuts card. All right.
Cool.
What else?
So I think that's it for spoilers, unless you have something else.
No, I think we'll talk a lot more about this set in the next 2 weeks, so we can leave it there for now and we can move on.
Right. Other thing in the news, we had a Silver Age skirmish this past weekend. This was week 2. Skirmish season 15. Looks like Briar's doing really, really well. Briar's at the top of the leaderboard. And then at 71 wins. And then after that, we have Acilio at 44 wins. So quite a big drop-off. But Acilio, Constellar Intelligence, or the young version of Constellar Intelligence, second place. I've been hearing scary things about the deck in Silver Age because of the amount of reach it has. Strike twice. I'm not sure if it's also playing Snapback. It might be. But there's just so much arcane reach in the opponent's turn in a 20 health format in that deck.
Yeah, I think that deck is I think Acilio is a very cool hero in Silver Age. Yeah. I mean, Briar taking up a big share of those wins. I mean, Acilio and Briar combined for like 40% of the wins. Almost, yeah,
45.
Maybe more. Yeah, 45, yeah.
Oh, 45, yeah, nearly half. Which I feel like has happened in Silver Age a lot, right? We've often seen this across Age metas.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of, there's like 2 decks being like almost half of the thing. But yeah. Did you, I'm guessing you didn't engage in any skirmish or anything?
No, I won't be playing a skirmish this season. If I was, though, I'd probably play Acilio. I think the deck looks really cool and really fun, honestly.
Yeah, it does.
This episode of Arsenal Pass is sponsored by Arcane Games and Events. AGE.events is your homepage to some of the best content in the game from top players and content creators in Flesh and Blood. Wanting to level up your game? Well, look no further. AGE Premium is the front page of competitive Flesh and Blood, where subscribers get exclusive access to bonus matches, theory articles by the biggest names in the game, tournament reports, event discounts, and so much more. You can head over to age.events, sign up for Premium, and use the discount code ArsenalPass5. That will get you your first month for 50% off, and you're also directly supporting us here on the podcast. So if you want to take your game to the next level with content from the likes of calling winners, Pro Tour top 8ers, and world champions like Michael Hamilton, teaching Flesh and Blood fundamentals, or Ben Dodd on how to master the most powerful equipment in the game, and yes, that is Scabskin Leathers, AGE Premium is where you need to be. All the details are in the description of this pod.
All right, other thing in the news, we have Calling Hamburg this weekend, which is going to be CC, and I want to see, yeah, it's our first CC calling post Mastery Pack Warrior.
Yep.
So I'm really excited to tune in, and my projection is that we're not going to see much changes in the meta from Mastery Pack Warrior. Do you have any predictions, Hayden?
I don't think so. I think if anything, maybe we'll see some representation of like Hala and stuff like that. Do I think they'll do well? No, but also, actually, in saying that, we've had a number of Dorinthia's top callings this year already. So maybe we'll see.
Yeah. I expect to see an increased representation of Hala, Olympia, and Dori, which is the 3 heroes that got the most support from the set. I still think while Mario's around and while Acilio is around, they're going to struggle to put up some real results. But maybe this calling proves us wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to wait and see. That's it for the news.
Command and Cookout time. If you want to get your questions in for Command and Cookout, you can do so. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can drop them in the YouTube comments below if you're a video watcher. If you're an audio listener on Spotify, you can also get your comments in there. If you're an Arsenal Pass patron, you can go to the Patrons Discord and drop your question there. Pankaj, or actually, if you see Pankaj at KC next week, give him a question in person with your name on it. Pankaj, I'm going to throw to you for the question this week.
Cool. This one comes from at Velvy Sage Walk. This was on YouTube a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing Mastery Pack Warrior. And the question is, since we are talking Mastery Pack Warrior, I have a question for Command and Cookout. A lot of people, in my experience, can get kind of salty over reacts, specifically ones like Tarantula Toxin or now Into the Muck, cards that punish you for blocking. While I personally don't think that a 1-card 3-4 instant pump is as egregious as a 1-card 6 instant pump, it does get rather frustrating when it's suddenly 3 of them, or even just 2 of them on an already very high attack, especially on an attack that has Go Again. Hello, Mario. It feels worse to find out after you try to stop something that there was no chance, actually, and unlike a pummel where it's telegraphed, in decks like Mario it gets exacerbated by the Go Again problem. Slippy with Bonds, for example, as well. Side note here, this is actually going to be very relevant for our main topic later today. But yeah, the question, what do you think the threshold for a healthy attack or instant reaction speed deck is? I personally think it's either a lack of free go again, like with many react-heavy warrior decks, or a very binary, it's either the first or the second swing dynamic, like dual-wield warriors. And most importantly, I think attack react-heavy decks need a lack of disruptive game-losing on hits, specifically unrelated to the thing you're trying to block. Maybe I'm just jaded against Mario, though. Interested to hear your opinions.
That's an interesting one. I don't know if I've ever thought about what is the healthy kind of threshold. I think I more think about the space of the class and like what that class needs to have a powerful piece of interaction, basically. And I actually think that I much prefer seeing it on the offensive side than the defensive side, personally. Like cards like Blunton and things like that. And although I know that's not attack instant speed reaction, sorry, but I guess it's like it's punishing you for a specific, like it's a card you think about, right? And we went back to this with hand traps the other week, like it's a card you think of. So I think on the truly defensive or offensive side, instant speed reactions, things like that. Yeah, I think action points is a good shout. Like Bonds is that people hated playing against Bonds because of the punish and slippy, right? But people didn't have a problem with Bonds as much, say, in New. Like it was an interesting puzzle in New, I think, the way that worked out. So it's also dependent on the hero and the deck that it sits within, not just the class that it sits within.
I think the go again mattered a lot in Slippy is the thing. I do agree. I think Bonds
exactly.
was way more toxic in Slippy than it was in New because of how easily Slippy gave it go again.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there were times I'm playing against Slippy and I looked at their hand for whatever reason. I thought it was like, I don't cut from the same cloth or whatever. I literally saw their hand and I realized I had no correct way to block their Bonds. And that was insane because of the just go again. They like start with the Bonds. If I block it too much, they just don't react on it. But if I don't block it enough, then they do react on it. And especially if they also have to take up the mantle or something, then it's just like I'm just getting Bonds no matter what. Even though you're playing face up into me, and I still don't have a correct thing. The go again piece was massive. Healthy threshold for like an attack or instant pre-reaction. It's interesting that this question brought up Into the Muck versus Tarantula Toxin, because that's sort of my go-to example for a clear difference between warrior cards and assassin cards. Yeah. I'm like, okay, here's Into the Muck, which is basically most of the time Iron Song response. Like it's a zero cost reaction where if
one
you've
card
gone
4
through
maybe
the hoop,
for a defense reaction, I guess.
Yeah, first you need to go through the hoop of wagering, and then they also need to block you. Very Iron Song response-esque, and then sure, maybe sometimes this is 0 for 4. But if you think about the ceiling of Into the Muck, it's like, okay, it's either against a Steel Blade Shunt or like a Staunch Response. So 6-ish, maybe 7. And what's the ceiling of Tarantula Toxin? 6. And all they had to do was just block your thing with stealth. But then Tarantula Toxin, unlike Into the Muck, has this insane floor of still coming in for 3, even if you don't do anything. Whereas Into the Muck just like rots. So I don't know. To me, it feels like Tarantula Toxin is definitely in the egregious side of things. 0 for 6 with a floor of 0 for 3 is just nuts. Whereas Into the Muck feels like the floor is 0 for 0. And then most of the time 0 for 3 is 0 for 4. And then if you're 1 in like 100 games, you get to use it on a Staunch Response directly. Like, okay, sure. But most of the time it's meh.
That's the thing. Like, that's the other thing is because... So I think there's this other piece where Into the Muck is a card that interacts with other cards in a non-specific manner. So to your point, the range is massive, but the average is going to be really low, and you're going to hate the card, right? And so it needs a specific thing to happen.
It's Shred. It's like Shred. All assassins have Arsenal to Shred and be like, I can never Arsenal this card. It feels like it's in that level.
Yeah, but I think Shred's a better card.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. Because it does a more specific thing that is more relevant, honestly. And like, yeah, it's like you can live the dream of Into the Muck hitting like an unmovable or a Staunch Response or like whatever, but it's like most of the time you're going to hate this card. Whereas like Tarantula Toxin, you're like, okay, well, yeah, my ceiling is the 1 card 6, but then, add on your on-hit effects that come with your cards. But my ceiling, my floor is just a pump for 3. Like, okay, cool. And yes, there's a small hoop with it, but it's really tiny, honestly. So, yeah, I think it's a really good point you made, Pankaj.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how to answer the question of the threshold, because to your point, it obviously is very much centered around the rest of the deck as well. And I think aside from Tarantula Toxin, I don't think Assassins really push the attack reaction or instant speed pump effect part of it that much. It's the other stuff that they have going around.
Well, what about this? Do you think that Torrential Toxin is a healthy card?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But funnily enough, I actually think Just a Nick is fine.
Okay, why?
Because...
I mean, I agree with you, but...
Yeah, right? Because it's so much more narrow in what it targets. It ends up being a little bit more telegraphed, and the breakpoint that it hits is 6. Like, in the sense that it's a 2-card 6 is like the breakpoint that you get. Your 1 power attack, and then you make it 6. You did a 2-card 6 as that with a blue and a red.
Yep.
That feels very just like on rate. It's nothing insane. Whereas T-Tox feels like your rate is nuts. You're like Kiss of Death T-Tox, and then that's like a 2-card 10. And if you also had Go Again or whatever else, is nuts. Yeah.
Okay. Is Blade Flurry healthy?
I think so. I think Blade Flurry is fine.
Okay.
Strong card, but it feels like, oh yeah, you go through a hoop of needing to attack twice. In some heroes like Dory, that means you also need a weapon to hit. In some other heroes, you needed like the action point, like your dual wielding warriors. Feels good. It feels like a nice, like a strong card, but not insane.
Jagged Edge.
Jagged is good. I think
good.
it's fine.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah.
I
tech
don't.
piece.
I don't know an answer to this question, but I did want to just get your view on a few cards that might be benchmarks as to whether these cards are healthy. Or
okay, I have a question. Actually, in that same vein, Blade Flurry reminded me of this. What do you think of Rain Razors? Obviously, right now it's whatever, because no ranger is going wide. But in Lexi days, what did you think of Rain Razors?
I think that card's healthy, yeah. I think that card is healthy. Because I think it...
the no block.
Yeah.
The no block does a lot.
I think it's offset. Yeah. It requires you to play in a certain way. And I think that's the thing with T-Toxin is kind of whether it's in Slippy, whether it's in Marionette, like it feels so strong either way, right? Whereas to your point, it's like these cards like Rain Razors and Lexi, yeah, felt really powerful, but outside, and it's balanced in other ways, and outside of that, it doesn't feel the same way. And I think it's the same with like Just a Nick, for instance, right? Like in certain instances, it does feel really powerful, but a lot of the time, it's not the case. And
I think what I'm taking away from this conversation, it feels like the floors of these cards is really what makes it feel balanced or not. Like Rain Razors had like a six power ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And Lexi, but then there's so many times where you died because you drew a Rain Razors. Oh yeah, I guess it could be 8. But so many times you died because it's a 0 block. There were many matchups where you have to side it out, like in the mirror, for example. You have to side it out, otherwise it's just really bad. And then this T-Tox, which is, okay, here's a 0 for 6 ceiling with a 0 for 3 floor, and it blocks 3. And it's like, what? Why? Like, why? It's just feels a bit much.
Yeah, I think T-Tox should have blocked 2. But I think we've kind of answered the question of where we think they're healthy. We think most of them are healthy, and that the line is somewhere just below T-Tox, somewhere in around, like, the threshold is somewhere in around Rain Races, I guess.
Yeah, I think Just a Nick was a very interesting example to talk about as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the restriction on it, like 0 for 5, you're like, well, but T-Tox is 0 for 6. It's not that different, except it is, though, because of the restriction of what you can play it on.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. It's an interesting question, and it kind of leads into the main topic, which we'll get onto in a second, and hopefully we've been able to answer your question. I think it's a tough one to answer, though. Like, I think that's the thing, is there's also a lot of subjectivity in the way that people feel playing against these cards. Because I know there's people who are like, oh, Blade Flurry is like, why did they ever print that card? So everyone has different feelings on this. You know, I know some people, like Singing Steel Blade was really contentious back in the day. It's like, this card sucks to play against, this, you know, and things like that. But yeah, I think T-Toxin is one of the most pushed reactions. I think you can Into the Muck. I don't think we'll put that in the same vein, honestly.
It's not. Yeah, Into the Muck is it's Iron Song response. It's Shred. It's that kind of level of card.
Yeah, and even against if I go back to just quickly T-Tox, like in Slippy, like that card was egregious even in Slippy. So yeah, okay. Want to get your questions in for Command and Cookout? Please do so. All the ways that I talked through earlier. Email us, arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. YouTube comments, Spotify comments, patrons in the Patreon Discord, or in person. You'll see Pankaj and Casey if you're there. Otherwise, I don't know where I'll be. Oh, I'll be in Korea next. Otherwise, yeah, see me at World Premiere Seoul and drop me a question if you like. Make sure your name is on it. And with that, Pankaj, it is time for us to go to the main topic of the pod. And again, I'm going to throw to you because this is a great topic that you've put our way this week, and kind of again flows off this question we just had.
Yeah, keeping in our streak, I suppose, of discussing topics that are just maybe a little bit more abstract in this downtime in between sets, in between big events, where we kind of just have some time to talk about Flesh and Blood theory, Flesh and Blood, just thoughts that are floating around in our head, while we don't have, specific metas to discuss, although that's going to change very soon with the calling this weekend. I figured we could talk about evasion and class identity, which was something that came to my mind a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing assessing game states in Fab, and we spoke a lot about life totals and how you need to understand your life totals as it relates to your game state, which is very much dependent on the closing power that the opponent's deck has. And it got me thinking of evasion, and then also, I'm very invested in flavor of heroes and classes, and it got me thinking of how that relates to class identity, because I think it was something that I had subconsciously understood, but I had never consciously brought forth. So I thought this would be a fun thing to discuss, how evasion and class identity are tied together. Now, I do want to preface this by saying, obviously, evasion isn't the only thing that defines class identity, but I think it is something very interesting we can look at as to what tools have given certain classes in terms of evasion and how that defines the role that they play and the feeling of that class. It's going to be a very free-form chat, Hayden, to be honest. I don't have an insane amount of questions and stuff. I just figured we could just go back and forth and flow on this. Any thoughts?
I think, first of all, defining evasion, I think, is the best place to start, because that's going to be a terminology that many players maybe aren't familiar with. Some may be familiar with it, but I guess might mean something a little bit different in Flesh and Blood. So I guess maybe that's the starting point, is, in your eyes, Pankaj, what is evasion in Flesh and Blood?
So I would classify evasion as presenting damage to your opponent that is evasive. No, I'm obviously not that. Need to define what evasive means. That is difficult for them to deal with in the sort of default way of blocking damage in Flesh and Blood. So, for example, sending a wounding blow or sending a scar for a scar is not evasive, because they can just turn their card sideways and block it.
Any card in the hand that has block value can get involved.
Exactly, which is the most default way to prevent damage in Flesh and Blood. Where things get evasive is when it's harder for your average Flesh and Blood card to deal with that damage, and you need to start going into specific pieces. So I think Flick Knives, for example, which is the 1 point of unpreventable damage, unless you specifically have Mental Block or Shelter from the Storm or Ward. Basically, the amount of cards that you have to deal with that sort of damage is a lot more narrow. Flick Knives is an example. There's way more that we're going to go over. That's how I define evasion.
So is arcane damage evasion?
I would add arcane damage. I would add tall arcane specifically as evasion, and split damage, which is the sort of damage rune blades do, which is 1 point of arcane off of rune chants, off of little pings. That is something I've put as a discussion point, because I actually don't know whether to count that as evasion or not. And I thought that would be something we could get into later.
So
but tall arcane, I would say. Tall arcane, I would say is evasive.
If you don't mind, like if you're okay to kind of move it around a bit.
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead.
I think it is, because what I would say is what isn't evasion is on hit effects. Right, because if they're to an extent, whereas there's a card I do want to ask you about specifically, which is Command and Conquer. But for instance, let's say it's I'm trying to think of a damage deal arcane damage on hit. But okay, say that's probably something from the quick step cards, for instance.
Static Shock. I want to say Static Shock.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So
right.
the lightning flow card.
Lightning flow on hit deal 1. Yeah.
So, for instance, I wouldn't call that evasion, because if you block out the physical damage, you will not get the on hit effect. Whereas on the flip side of that, when you attack with this, deal 1 arcane damage, or the vexing malice or something like that. I'm like,
or Arcanic Crackle. Let's go Arcanic Crackle.
Great example, much better example. Yep. I would say that split damage element, the 1 damage, is a form of evasive damage, I would say.
So I'm curious why. This is why I put split damage specifically, because we need to discuss this.
I can't put a card from my hand in front of that 1 arcane damage.
Okay, but when it comes to a 0-for-4 breakpoint, to summarize the point of contention over here,
sure.
I think it's hard to distinguish between evasion and just good value.
Yep.
For example, just good value is, I wouldn't count that as evasion. When Aurora goes 0-for-4, 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 I wouldn't say that's evasive damage. That's just a lot of damage, and it's just good value.
Okay.
So why is Crackle more evasive than, say, Wounding Blow?
I'll use an example to paint the picture. Pankaj, you are on 1 life. You have a 4-card hand. I have 1 card in my hand. It's a Scar for a Scar. You can block that out with 2 cards. Swap. It's an Arcanic Crackle. It deals 3. It comes in for 3. You can block with 1 card, and it's dealing you the final point of damage that you can't block with a card in your hand.
I still block with 2 cards as long as I have AB.
Well, you have to have AB. So that's where I say that it is the evasion comes in, is you have to have the arcane. Okay, or
this is why I'm saying this is why I was distinguishing between Tall Arcane specifically.
Yeah.
And like Tall Arcane is evasive because it's quite unreasonable for many decks to have like AB6, for example.
Sure.
So when I send a Burn Bear, it's like I'm always leaking damage. Mm-hmm. But AB1 feels like, okay, people will present AB1 into your Runeblade. And so I don't see why Arcanic Crackle is any more evasive than any 0/4. With the exception being something like, obviously, defense reactions and armor. And then maybe the argument can be made, I think. So, but on just the surface, when you have the 1 point of AB, they still take 2 cards, right?
Sure. So I think that's where evasion is a sliding scale, is a continuum of less evasive to more evasive, I would say. And I would put the split damage of like an Arcanic Crackle on the much less evasive side, to your point, versus something like a Burn Bear or a Flick Knives, or there's other things that are even harder to prevent on the much more evasive side of things. So I do believe that split damage is still evasion in a sense, because it requires something specific to be able to deal with it, as opposed to physical damage is the most pure form of damage, I would say.
Yeah, that's fair. It's like sort of like on the border-ish, right? Where you're like, or maybe it's just less evasive.
Entry level. It's the entry level.
To use your sliding scale. Yeah, to use a sliding scale. Let's talk about some stuff.
Can I ask one card?
Can
I ask one? Just for definitions purposes, we go through this. Is Command and Conquer evasion?
I wouldn't count it as evasion.
Let me other.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Because, again, the default... It feels like Command and Conquer punishes you... when you specifically just have defense reactions.
It's a punish state, right? It's the same with like well, actually that's a good point. There's overpower evasion then.
Yes, I would count overpower as evasion. Again, it's not very good evasion for many cases.
Sure.
But I would say I would put overpower in the list of these are evasive mechanics in the game. And I would put it higher on our sliding scale compared to split damage.
Okay. So then is Command and Conquer as the type text on Command and Conquer, it's like on the slight other side of not being evasive ever so slightly, but it's kind of on the outside looking in. It's like, hey, I'm doing an evasive job, like screw your defense reactions. But
it's less evasive than split damage in my mind.
Sure, okay.
But split damage is already sort of like on the cusp, and I would say overpower
it's evasive.
Overpower falls into the bubble, I suppose.
Sure.
Anyway, okay, so let's go on and talk about the different form of evasions that we do have that I think we both will agree definitely do count as evasion.
Maybe.
And just talk about how the different classes and heroes get access to them and
good.
how this kind of relates to their class identity, right? So starting with, I think, probably the most face-up, this is just an evasive mechanic. There's Dominate. I put Overpower in this category. Mm-hmm. Dominate and Confidence, I think, definitely stand out as, okay, these are straight-up evasive pieces. And they seem to be quite limited to mostly Guardians and Ranger. It feels like Guardians and Ranger occupy this part of the color pie, so to speak, to use a terminology from different games, where if you see an Overpower, Dominate, Confidence type card, it's typically in these classes where this will be go tall with something that's hard to block.
You can call it the class pie if you like. I think that's fine.
Class pie, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what this initial setting the stage is kind of about, which is, okay, there's this class pie, Dominate, Confidence, Overpower, seems to be Guardian Ranger coded. Do you have something you want to say on that?
Mechanologist?
Yeah, so that's the thing I do want, when we expand on this topic further, I'll definitely want to go into where other classes dip into this shared class pie, so to speak. Which, spoiler again, why the Command and Cookout question was so relevant was that I think when Assassin dips into the Ninja class pie for evasion, that's when it starts to feel a little bit egregious. So we can go on to the next one. I would say small attacks is another form of evasion. Think Kodachis. Kodachi for one is something I would count as evasion. Would you agree with that?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because I think you're tying value to evasion now, and I don't think that is. So
it's not value, right? It's a 1-card 2 if you talk about value.
Yeah, I don't know. Something doesn't sit right with me because I think it is. Again, I can throw a card in front of it if I want to from my hand. I can always stop a Kodachi for 1.
So let's say I go Kodachi for 1. Let's say I just do a typical hand. Kodachi, and 1 cost 5. Kodachi, critical strike.
Yeah. Right?
To me, that is evasive damage. Because, yes, to your point, yes, you can still go ahead and block the Kodachi with a full card, but there's no way for you to, I see what you're saying, because I'm gonna use the word efficient over here, and then that sort of plays right into what you're talking about, then you're talking about value, right? I'm like, there's no efficient way for you to block Kodachi for 1, Kodachi
correct.
for 1, unless you have some specific tool like Shelter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think for me, it's not, because I think it sits in a similar, like a brother or a sister across the way from Evasion, which is like
split damage. Okay.
Well, again,
it feels way more evasive to me than like a Rune Blade split damage typically.
But I can throw a card in front of a physical damage. I think this is where I'm tying Evasion a lot to physical damage, I guess, as opposed to things where I need a specifically different tool. And I think it is annoying, it is super efficient, it is value driven, but Evasion, I think it is not, personally.
Well, I think it's because I see that as an end game tool for like these ninja decks. So you think of Ira, for example. That is
as a game
the end game way to okay, that's fair. Okay, I think you're fair to point out that's not, I guess, technically evasion. I would still put it, to me, in the sliding scale, I would put it higher than split damage in terms of evasion.
Can I ask a question then? If I stack up a bunch of pot of strength potions, and a bunch of Teklo pounders, and I present you an attack for 25, is that evasion?
Yeah, so now we're going back into the value thing, right? With where does it stop being value and where does it start being evasion? Because that's kind of in a similar vein of what I spoke about earlier, where when they go 4-4-4-4, it's just a lot of damage, but it's not evasion. Except you're guaranteed to league. I think that's a fair
I play my
point
Rain Razors, and I have
up.
a 30 damage physical.
I will say I would put setting up in a weird evasion case. I would say for example what Lyth does, where they spend 2 turns just setting up auras for +12, and then they smack you. I would count that under evasion, where okay, you've gone so high above what a normal hand would block that it counts as being evasion.
Sure. I think the end result is evasive, but the mechanics involved with it are not evasion, is what I would say. If that makes sense.
Sure. Okay, then where are you on attack reactions then? Because I put attack reactions in a category of evasion as well.
Me too, because they require you to have a certain card to be able to respond to them. They're not face up. I can't cover as much as possible with my hand to prevent the damage without knowing what they have. So for example, if my opponent attacks for 6 and I lay 2 cards in front and then they play their pummel on top, they have gotten around what I am trying to do in terms of lay my cards down to defend the damage.
Okay, but if they don't have an action point remaining, you could just put 12 in front of it.
That's true, you could. And then they will arsenal it and they'll do it to you next turn.
Yeah, so well, then I feel like the same thing applies for Kodachis, where it's okay, if you put a card in front of each of my Kodachis.
Okay. I'm happy to give up attack reactions not being evasive. I'm okay with that. And maybe they're not. Maybe they're not.
Wow, I was going to be no, convince you the small attacks are
it's the other way around.
Because I think attack reactions are
it's the other way
evasive.
around. I'm not moving on that. I'll give you attack reactions and maybe not evasive.
Okay, fine. This, I guess, turns out we have way more cards, way more mechanics that we are contentious on whether they count as evasion or not than I thought. Because I have a few more where I'm is this count as evasion?
Right.
It sounds like we have a lot to discuss.
Go.
Okay, but let's go over something that I think we both can agree is definitely evasion. Intimidate. Can we agree intimidate is evasion?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. All right, so we got intimidate, we got dominate, overpower, confidence. These are guaranteed evasion. Tall arcane. We both agree tall arcane's evasion.
It's in.
Okay. Unpreventable damage. You got is flick knives evasion? It is, right?
Yeah.
Flick knives, riptides, trap damage, Vincent. Vincent's Vince's ability literally says unpreventable.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Ranger with they're defensive damage, so I think it's slightly different, but I think it's evasive in nature. It just in Flesh and Blood it manifests a little bit differently. You don't typically deal with defensive damage in other games, but yep, I agree. Yes.
Sounds good. And then we have small attacks, which it seems like we are contending on, and we have attack reactions, which I do think fall under evasion. I just think of for example, we use a term like blender, right? Like when I say warrior blender, and this is coming from the perspective of Fang, because that's kind of where this whole evasive idea came to me a lot, where I'm like in my endgame when my opponent's at low life totals, and I realize they just don't have any good way to block my daggers.
Yeah.
So I go dagger for 1, I'm holding some cards. They simply have no good way to block me, especially if I have effects that let me swing the same dagger again. So they like sidestepping, right? It's what we call sidestepping. I'm like, okay, no, here's like a Tooth of the Dragon instead when you block 6 in the first thing. And then my next thing's now 4, and you're like, okay, you block that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to attack with it again with my Long Whisker Loyalty and do it again. It feels very evasive in nature when I'm playing it, and it feels like I'm putting my opponent in a you have no good way to block this sort of situation, which to me falls under evasion for that reason. That's kind of why I put attack reactions in the same bucket as well. I think Assassin does a similar thing, where it's like, okay, on his low life totals now, you simply have no good way to block, especially if I have go again. Is sort of where I landed on why I've classified it under evasion.
That's just the game to me. I don't think it's evasion. It's the same as like if I've locked my opponent out of any game, my weapon can be whatever. It could be let's use it. I'm playing Talishar. I don't know, whatever. I'm playing Anathos.
You're playing Titan's Fist. Just play
whatever. Titan's Fist is great. Sure. At some point, if I'm able to present my 3 or 4 cards every time, and they have to use their 4 cards defensively every time, and I'm leaking through a damage each time, I'm going to win the game. Like I've locked them out of the game. That's just flesh and blood at some points. You just get to the end game. And
okay, I think I know maybe where I can maybe define this a little bit better.
You can try.
It's where my numbers on my turn, the amount of damage I'm presenting is actually not higher than a typical flesh and blood hand can block. I'm not really presenting more than 12.
Sure.
But I'm presenting it in such a way that a normal flesh and blood hand will always leak damage. So, for example, 4/4/4 like falls in this sort of category where unless you have like 3 defense reactions.
So a 0 for 4 is evasion.
Well, it needs to be backed up with like but this is why it's specifically attack reactions and small attacks. I think if it's just like a face up 0 for 4, it's not. But when it's you don't know what this value is and as an action point, that's when it starts being evasive. Like that's why I put attack reactions and small attacks under evasion. Because when it's like this, especially when the attack reactions doesn't necessarily need to be played on this one, you think warriors, you think assassins, you think Slippy back in the day. Because attack reaction doesn't necessarily need to be played on the first attack because of the action point, that's when it gets evasive. That's when it becomes.
I'm good with the attack reaction.
You need a specific tool. Otherwise you will leak damage.
I'm good with the attack reaction. Why don't we agree to disagree on the small attacks?
So you're convinced.
Well, I was already with you on attack reactions, and you convinced me that it wasn't by trying to put it into a different bucket. So I tell you what, why don't we agree to disagree on the small attacks? We can move on, and our listeners out there can give us their view on attack reactions and small attacks if they think they are evasion. And obviously anyone who says that Kodachi's evasion is obviously incorrect.
Yeah,
but that's fine.
count Kodachi's. I would count Kodachi's evasion. All right, we can move
Clearly
on.
Crazy, but that's fine.
Okay, we'll move on to the points that are brought up as do these count as evasion? We're also fully just ignoring the class identity piece of it. Okay, let me quickly go over. So Intimidate is like sort of the brute and the reviled class/talent pie. Small attacks, if you agree or disagree, it's like in the ninja and sort of assassin dipping into it color pie. Tall arcane, very wizard color pie. I don't think there's anything else that is tall arcane. We're starting to see like Ziggy maybe dip into it a little bit. They have some amp Aphrodite as well, but otherwise it's mostly wizard. Attack reactions are warriors and assassins mostly. And then you have this unpreventable damage bucket, which seems like many classes can sometimes have a piece of it. You think Flick Knives, which is like assassins and ninjas. You think Riptide with unpreventable trap damage, and you have Vincent. So these are like so many different classes that are doing that.
Yep.
Now, to discuss whether these count as evasion, what do you think of damage on the opponent's turn? So I'm thinking, well, there's Riptide's traps. I'm thinking Wizard. I'm thinking lightning cards like Burn Up Shock or just the shock side of this, which we saw come out in Rosetta, where suddenly Aurora is dealing damage to you on your turn. I don't know. Where do you think these count as evasion?
Yeah, I think so. I think they require a certain tool. They're hard to interact with, and your opponent can choose when they deploy the damage. I think so. I think in Flesh and Blood, yes, it's a little bit different to other games, but yeah, in Flesh and Blood, I think they do count.
So you're saying if we agree that the one random arcane ping on your own turn, like say off of Arcanic Crackle, is very, very low on the evasive scale, where would you put damage on the opponent's turn?
Slightly above that, I guess.
Because I'm curious.
Somewhat above
I'm
that.
curious why, say, a burn up shock on your turn is more evasive than Arcanic Crackle on my turn.
So say that again, sir. Why?
I'm curious why, like, just playing a shock on your turn is classified as more evasive than doing a split damage thing on my turn. Just like a one arcane with some damage.
Less. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily call it more evasive. I guess it's just there's more flexibility to it, right? So it is you can choose the timing of when you deploy it relative to the way your opponent deploys their card. So you're more likely to be able to find a spot where it is truly evasive and they have no way to prevent it because they may have no resources available to Arcane Barrier. That's all.
I see. That makes sense. I see. So it's like once you include your own agency, you can deploy it in a way that it's guaranteed that you're getting that. Like when you Storm Stride is only when you see your opponent's last card, for example.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate form of evasion, right? You're just like, oh, you have no cards left in hand.
It's guaranteed.
You're dead.
Okay, cool. The next one on this list was split damage, which we already went over. Mm-hmm. All right, this one's interesting. What about board state? Does like a persistent damage outlet, think like your Charm Rigor Mortis, your Mirror Guy back in the day, stuff like that, does that count as evasion?
Is a weapon evasive?
I don't think so. Most weapons aren't.
No, I don't think a board state is evasive either, unless it has true evasion on it. So, for instance, Asvalai has evasion tacked onto it,
or a burn them all tacked on to your dragons.
Sure, burn them all. Great example, I think, of this kind of like persistent evasive state. So yeah.
The reason I brought that up is because, again, this was off the back of our discussion around endgames, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's once they put you in this life threshold, you sort of end up slowly getting locked out. And to me, board state fell under this category more so than like a weapon, where once you are forced to block the Mirror Guy, for example, that was a very classic, okay, doors shut on you because you're forced to block the Mirror Guy, and now, which means you can't clear it, which means you've lost the game.
Yep.
It's sort of why I put this up for discussion. But I do get your point where it's not like early in the game, if they swing your Mirror Guy, there is no reason that you can't actually fully block it. Like, there's no reason for it to guarantee leak damage onto you. It's just that when you keep on and that, you will fatigue out and lose. But it's not, in our definition of evasion, you're not actually guaranteed to leak some damage on it.
Correct. The damage that is on the printed on the card is not evasive in nature. It's the same conversation I go back to with the Kodachis. It's the same conversation I go back to with the 0 for 4 at the end game versus a 3 and a 1 arcane damage. Like I think I'm very resolute that evasion is the damage itself and the way that you can interact with it or not be able to interact with it, regardless of the game state, I guess.
I see.
Because so in theory, Burn Bear, like a Burn Bear early in the game, I can just not care. It doesn't mean it's any less evasive. It just has less relevance to the game right now. Like, for instance, if my opponent is about to be dead on board and they throw a Burn Bear at me and I can just eat it because it doesn't matter and they're dead, it doesn't make it less evasive. It just makes it less relevant. And it's the same for this, I think. You know, Yes, at the end game, if there's a bunch of allies on the board, they're going to kill me. Yeah, they're a lot more relevant, but they're not evasive in the nature. They're just going to kill me and end the game, as with a weapon.
Right. So that makes sense. Okay, I like that. So then, by that logic, split damage when it's like small arcane pings and like you have AB1 because you came prepared, that isn't evasive then. That's fallen back down the scale to not evasive.
It's still evasive because the damage itself requires something for you to specifically deal with it. That isn't my physical blocking of the card in my hand. It has an evasive nature to it in some way, shape, or form.
But just like all your cards have block values, you can also, in this paradigm where we're saying, okay, your card block for 3, you can also say your card's pitch for some amount, and so as long as you have AB1, it's like you can still just interact with the damage, right?
Correct, but you've added that texture of if you have AB1, then you can interact with it. That is true. That is something you can do.
I see.
Regardless of the game state. The evasive does not change. That's what I'm saying. Exactly what you're saying is my point. The regardless of the game state, that one ping of damage being evasive or not doesn't change. The static is it evasive or not evasive. Because I could say I could say to you, you peer into me, you've got a deck with overpower, and I'm playing all reactions in my deck, so your overpower isn't evasive. But that's texture of the game state. The mechanic itself is an evasive mechanic.
I see. Okay, I think I will sort of contend when the arcane pings are small, it doesn't quite count as evasion, because like the way I see it, okay, suppose I'm the Runeblade player, and I'm like, let me start with the other example. I'm a wizard player. Sure. I can see the AB. I can math out exactly whether my thing's going to kill them. Whereas I can't do the same as Runeblade as long as they have like AB1.
Because it's
which feels like a...
I mean, semantics.
Yeah, okay. All right,
I think for the purpose of the podcast, we're going to have to move on, Pankaj, and we're just going to have to...
We should move on.
Yeah.
We should move on. Yes, I think you had something to bring up regarding different types of evasion.
Oh, I already said it. I think that evasion is a sliding scale. Like, there's forms, I think there's maybe even you could put into 3 buckets, which is like soft evasion, interactive evasion, and non-interactive evasion. Soft evasion are those things we spoke about, like single pings of damage, or like overpower, I think is like a soft evasion. And then you've got like, I think, interactable evasion, which is like dominate, right? Like it's a very specific way. You need to have specific cards in order to be able to interact with it, right? And have them at the right time. Whereas Arcane Barrier, it would sip, right? Whereas a defense reaction, you have to have it at the right time. And then there's this really, kind of difficult things like Vincent's hero ability, for instance, that is almost non-interactable, right? Or for some decks, Flick Knives, if you don't have any way to prevent damage, like a Shelter from the Storm, things like that. So that's kind of the way I look at evasive damage in this game, and I do think it is a bit of a continuum.
Yeah, well, Vincent's is literally unpreventable.
Exactly.
Right? If they activate the hero,
it is the hardest evasion in the game.
You can do. Yeah, there's literally nothing you can do.
Exactly.
You will take the 1 damage. Okay, let's talk about where this class pie or color pie or whatever, it gets pushed or bent or overlapped over. And I just want to clarify, this isn't these are design mistakes, but I'm more just thinking about, in this discussion around class identity and evasion, it does feel like there are certain moments where we see classes borrow these mechanics from different classes. You brought up a great mechanologist point where it feels like, there are times when mechanologist does dip into what we earlier established as dominate, overpower, confidence, feeling more in the Ranger Guardian territory. You think of cards like Convection Amplifier, which Dash.io gets access to, and they can use to add evasion to their attacks. I also feel like, sticking with the mechanologist piece, it feels like if we agree that attack reactions are some form of evasion, then they also dip into that a little bit with like Boom Grenade off the top. Would you consider Boom Grenade off the top as like dipping into like the attack reaction instant speed space?
It's doing a form of, right?
It's interesting, right?
It's doing a form of. That one's very interesting and very great. I think it's doing a form of. I think that one's not clear cut. I think you could argue that.
We've seen it in Puffin. I think Puffin straight up has all these attack reactions evasion, right?
Yeah. And
would you consider Puffins? Yeah.
What are the Puffin ones?
Well, all the Zeppelins.
The onboard ones. The onboard ones. Yeah, I think those are actually a really interesting form of kind of like soft evasion to a degree of like, they have this kind of onboard ability. What I think is interesting about Dominate though as well is like Mechanologist is not the only class that splashes into Dominate. Brute.
Oh, for sure.
Brute splashes into Dominate. Yeah. Runeblade has Dominate. Draconic has Dominate. Like Dominate is a one that is kind of shopped around, I would say, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and right now I think Overpower is the one that's being given to more and more people. I think they're obviously way more comfortable giving people Overpower. Like Olympia right now kind of straying into that territory with a bunch of Overpower, right? Now, I did... this was, under at least my definition, where I do feel like stuff like a bunch of Kodachis, like action points with small attacks, to me counts as evasion.
Sure.
And to me, it feels like Mario with like Callistra. There's something to me that it feels very evasive to me. Maybe I'm using a wrong term for it. Maybe it is just value, to your point. Or maybe I'm conflating it with something else. But to me, when the Mario starts with Callistra with Go Again and a bunch of cards in hand, that to me feels evasive. It's the same reason why Fang Online feels evasive to me, where it feels like it's very difficult for me to actually leak 0 damage when they're online and they have a bunch of cards in hand with the action point. Even though the amount of damage they're presenting on this turn isn't higher than 12, I'm still guaranteed leaking damage because of the way the damage is being presented, which is why I consider evasive, which is why I put Mario in this sort of feels like borrowing the ninja-esque evasive piece of the class pie when they get stuff like, here's a Kalisha for 2 go again, into something else it could potentially also have go again. It's sort of where I want to bring the discussion of overlapping class identities when it comes to evasion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I bucket all those into difficult to deal with efficiently damage is kind of how I would see them, and I think that like Assassin has that naturally because it plays daggers. Like its weapons are daggers, because you could also make you just made the same claim for like Warrior, right? With whether it be Fang, whether it be other dual weapon, right, with like Quicksilver daggers or whatever it might be. Like there is, I think that is tied to me. That is tied to daggers. That is it's not a class identity, it is a weapon identity, I think. And it's just that the class is those that use those weapons as their primary. So that's kind of how I see it. And Kalista is, I think, a nice design space that allows you to utilize a blue in a good way in Assassin with just your weapons, which you don't necessarily, and so lets you lean into weapon centric territory, which is not typically something that Assassin may be able to do well. So that's kind of where I see it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of pushing the class pie, I think a card that's really interesting that we never saw being played in CC, but I think we have seen being played in Sage. I think Chris Yali played it in his Sage Briar list. Harness Lightning, which is an elemental Runeblade action. It's a Runeblade action that deals 3 arcane damage if you have fulfilled the condition on it, which is one of those pieces when I saw that, I was like, oh, they're starting to give this tall arcane piece of the color pie, which used to be just Wizard, into these other classes. It seems like Lightning is dipping into that quite a little bit. Maybe that's part of the Lightning talent pie, where Ziggy is starting to have it. This elemental lightning. Actually, no. Earth has it too.
Yeah, there's 2.
Florin had it with Channel the Millennium Tree, which was really annoying because when you had to, there were certain decks that had to present more than AB1 into them just because of Channel the Millennium Tree, which I thought was a really cool instance of the talent / class pie sort of overlapping and dipping into each other.
And that's where I really like talents. I see talents often as like a modifier to like the class kind of color pie. Like they add a layer in over the top. So for instance, I was talking before about maybe like Ninja with Dominate. Well, Draconic I think adds an interesting layer to that with I can't remember the Draconic card, but if you go wide enough on it has what's the mechanic where you go wide enough on chain
links?
It's
a Dromai 5 specialization, I think.
Yeah.
You're thinking Rupture?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
Wait, Rise Up. You're thinking Rise Up.
Rise Up. Yeah, Rise Up. So things like that I think are really interesting, and I think that's kind of what this does. And, you know, you could say like, Vixing Malice is kind of interesting, and that's Runeblade only. But I think once you get beyond 2 and you start to get like 3, 4, 5, like, you know, you're kind of saying...
Millennium Tree.
I think, Millennium Tree, the Harness Lightning. There's another one, right? There's another one that does 3 damage as well from Rosetta. Not from Rosetta, from Tales of Aria. I can't remember the name of it, but there's another one from Tales of Aria as well.
3 arcane damage Runeblade attack.
No, not attack. Non-attack action.
Oh, Inspire Lightning. Oh my god, you're right.
Yeah, Inspire Lightning.
Yeah, if it's fused, it deals 3 arcane. Yes, you're
correct.
Right.
So just stuff like that, which I think is quite interesting.
Actually, funnily enough, if you go even further back, Sonata Arcanics technically can deal a bunch.
Actually,
Mercurial Skies
Tales
from
was
Omens.
Before Inspire Lightning was before Sonata Arcanics. There you go.
Wait, what? No, Sonata was before. Sonata was definitely around before Tales came out.
Isn't Sonata Everfest, which came after Tales? Or did Everfest come before Tales of Aria? Am I wrong?
Everfest came after Tales, but I don't think Sonata is Tales.
Sonata is...
No, Sonata's Monarch. Yeah.
It's Monarch. Okay, sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, Sonata was like turbo early.
My apologies. Okay.
Yeah, and actually Mercurial Skies actually from Omens actually is evasive if you can get the on hit, right? Which is then at that point doesn't like super count anymore. It feels like. Yeah, that doesn't super count. No, on hit doesn't quite count. Anyway, so there's that. Okay, attack reactions. Do you think like Ninja with stuff like Katsu with the shurikens and Ancestral Empowerment, does that dip into the sort of attack reaction pie of Evasion? To me, it does feel that way a little bit, especially when there are a bunch of like shurikens in the field and like breaking scales. I'm like, it just feels like there's no good way to block this. But it feels like it's maybe still in your category of Oh no, you can still just block it out though.
No, I think they definitely do. You know, but it's the ninja flavor. So, for instance, like Ancestral Empowerment, you know, a lot of these, like, they give one buff, or like Legacy of Ikaru, or like, Combustion Point, like
Breaking Scales.
Yeah, like these sorts of things. I think they are ninjas, you know, they are the ninja version of it, right? Which I think is really cool. And there's even ones that aren't pump, specifically like Throw Dagger, right? Which is evasive damage and an attack reaction speed. So yeah, I think it's ninjas, and obviously that's an assassin as well. But I think that's ninjas kind of modifier on top of attack reactions.
Okay, I think I figured out. Just coming back to the Kodachi discussion. Now we're talking about small attacks again. Here's my take. If I just send one power attack 6 times, I will count this as evasion. This is why Kodachi falls under that.
I definitely wouldn't.
You would when I go 1-1. If I'm like, here's 6 tigers that are coming in for 1, I'm like, that is straight up evasive though. How am I supposed to prevent all that damage? There's no way.
But I mean,
unless I have a specific tool like shelter.
There's many ways. Can also use
then you're talking about specific tools.
Can use equipment.
I mean, they're talking about specific tools, right?
But then that's the same then that you get into the same conversation of like, I can send five, you know, I have 3 of a kind on this turn, and I can send 5 arrows with my rain razors, or 4 attacks with my double rain razor, and all of a sudden there's this evasion. It's like, it's not evasion. It's still physical damage that I could interact with. It's just a massive amount of damage in a specific way.
To me, damage ceiling is different from evasion. To me, like, once the damage ceiling goes too high, I'm like, sure, you can maybe count that as evasion, but it's not exactly in the theme, in the spirit of the conversation. I'm like, the spirit of the conversation is the damage ceiling isn't actually that high, but you are still guaranteed to leak, is I guess what I would consider as evasion.
I'm just not going to agree.
That makes sense.
Sorry, Pankaj, you're going to lose me on this one. So I think you just have to default to the audience on this and see whose side of the fence they sit on, because you will not convince me of that one, unfortunately.
All right, well, audience, back me up. Then tell us in the comments why Hayden is so wrong. Anyway, I think I'm gonna win this one. Honestly, I think I'm gonna win this one. We'll see. That's basically all I really wanted to discuss on evasion and class identity.
I think the class identity piece is really interesting, because it is obviously something that is so tied to Flesh and Blood, you know, in so many things are tied to Flesh and Blood's identity. That's not just not just class related. It could be equipment related, right? Like, you know, famously, you know, legs give you actions, head gives you intellect, arms give you power, chest gives you resource, right? Like things like that are so tied to the fabric of the way Flesh and Blood started. And then you talk about things like you said, class identity, right? Or even mechanics that are class specific. It may not be evasion, it could be other mechanics that are class specific. And I think we see that LSS have continually pushed the boundaries on this, and maybe it's through things like I spoke about, a modifier of talent. I think is really a great way to look at this. And sometimes they just say, you know what, actually it's time to lean into this in a different space than what maybe were expecting. But I do think you can still see they are really tied to their class pies, for instance, to their fundamentals of their design space. And I'm sure they have a doctrine, a Bible, so to speak, of these design principles.
Oh, certainly. And yeah, like I said, evasion isn't the only thing that defines class identity, but just us speaking about it a few weeks ago made me think about more consciously about how it does feel like certain forms of evasion are siloed to certain classes and talents. And it's very interesting when you see that being pushed and being that being introduced into other things. Like when we saw Intimidate once again come back with Reviled, it was like, ooh, okay, now this is this new talent that is getting this piece of the pie, which we only saw in Brute ever beforehand.
I think
Tal Arcane now going to Rune Blades and stuff. It's just interesting.
I think it's so important that it is tied though, because already there's
kind of everyone having dominate. That's
exactly,
crazy.
But there's already complexity to this game where it's like you sit down and my opponent flips a hero, and what kind of deck are they playing based on the hero they're playing? You know, are they gonna try and like kill me? Are they gonna try and fatigue me? Are they gonna try and combo me? What weapons might they present? You know, like there's so many what ifs and potentials already, and then you add on top of like, oh, well, I don't know what mechanics I have to play around or what mechanics they may have. Like you need some strong level of expectation of what their deck should be able to do and what it shouldn't be able to do. Like that's the great thing, right? You sit down against a ranger, you know one thing they're not going to be able to do is present arcane damage to you. Like that is great. Like, you know what I mean? And so if it's all of a sudden it's like, hey, here's this lightning ranger, it's like, okay,
well,
so
Lexi, right. Did, but okay, well, could have,
exactly. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so they can because they have this talent modifier on top. Are they likely to? Is the next question. So I really do appreciate the design philosophy on those things, and I think it's it's fun. It's interesting, and I think to your point, evasion is really important in this game. But it's important also that it is knowable. I think is important as well. And I guess the one that breaks that the most is probably attack reactions, right? I think it's the one that breaks it the most because every hero can play an attack. There is generic attack reaction. There is a number of generic attack reactions, right? So it's probably the one that breaks the rule the most. But I think that's
yeah.
okay.
But there's at the same time because the counter to it is also available to everyone.
Exactly.
It feels like the one that's most okay to give access to everyone.
100%. I massively agree. Imagine if
except on the CNC pummel. Is that evasion? Is that evasive? If not, answer in the comments.
CNC double down. Ooh. Anyway, awesome. Well, interesting topic, Pankaj. I know that we had a big debate there, and I'm sure our listeners and the audience will be able to let us know whether Kodachi's, these small attacks are evasion or not. They can chime in there. They may also disagree with us on attack reactions or some other amount of the evasion that we spoke about in this pod.
True.
But I do think it's quite an interesting way to look at class design and class aspects of this game.
To make it more concrete of what we're asking, I'm making the point that I think if you go 1-1-1-1-1 like 6 times, presenting too much damage, but that's evasion, and Hayden says it's not evasion. So
well, to be fair, that's not what you said at the start. You said that.
I said Kodachi's.
Attacks,
but I changed it. Yes, but I changed it like, okay, in theory, walk me through this thought experiment.
If you had a mechanic, if you had an ability
one,
to have something that could present, like, for instance, if you had a card that said deal 6 physical damage or deal 1 physical damage to the opponent, or an attack that said like double, what's the 1 cost ninja attack you can play it twice, you can like bounce it, double
strike.
Double. If that was you could play that 6 times or whatever, then okay, I kind of agree that is bordering on evasive. That is very different.
Bordering, okay.
That is very different to Kodachi critical strike, I'll tell you what.
Okay.
Anyway, yes. That has been episode 279 of Arsenal Pass, the great debate on evasion. A good conversation on class identity and evasion in Flesh and Blood. A little bit of a look at Usurp spoilers, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that over the coming weeks. And until next episode, good luck to those who are playing in Hamburg this weekend, and we'll see you next episode.